right, good evening, everyone. I'd like to get started. I'm a big believer in starting on time so that we're so that we're respectful of everyone's time, because you did take time out of your evening to come join us and be an engaged member of your community. So with that, my name is Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson. If you are here in person, please make sure that you were signed in at the table in the lobby. I know Melanie, one of our staff members, has been corralling people to make sure they got signed in. If for some reason you didn't get corralled, just sign the sheet on your way out this evening. So we're here for a neighborhood meeting for the Historic East Side Neighborhood Association. They're proposing what is called a conservation overlay zone for the Historic East Side District. So in terms of who we are, again, I'm Jennifer Hewitt-Apperson. I'm a principal planner with the City of Longmont Planning and Development Services. With us here tonight from the city, we have Dallas Stiles, who is keeping all of our technology running smoothly, and we couldn't do it without him. We have Melanie Neske and Nathan Jones-Meyer, who are outside on signature corralling duty. We also have Longmont Public Media behind the curtain, who are ensuring that this gets recorded and streamed for our YouTube channel, so that folks who aren't able to be here this evening or had a conflict and couldn't watch it live can who couldn't watch it live can watch it at their convenience. And if there's something, if you find yourself after the fact with questions or going, did I remember that right? You can always go back to the YouTube recording and watch it yourself as well. From Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association, we have Sharon O'Leary, we have Bob McLaughlin, and we have Rick Jacoby. So with that, sorry about that. So in terms of our format and overview, this is a hybrid meeting format. We typically we've been doing neighborhood meetings via live stream exclusively since the pandemic began. We kept doing it that way because it worked really well. We decided to try this hybrid format. So this is the first time we've done this format. So we're all learning together. So bear with us if stuff gets wonky. So basically, this is an informational meeting. No decisions are being made tonight. We don't have a formal application under review. So again, this meeting is being live streamed on the city's YouTube channel. And additionally, there will be an opportunity for people watching the live stream to call in at the public comment period. So if you are watching this online and you have questions or comments, we will have information here in a little bit for you to call in and get in line to ask questions of staff and the applicant as well. So I'm going to go into quite a bit of detail about code requirements and history, including a comparison of zoning under the previous code that was adopted and the current code that was adopted in 2018. Just giving you forewarning, it's going to be technical, probably a little boring, but it definitely provides important context for the requested conservation overlay. So it's just really setting the stage. Representatives from HENA will discuss why they're seeking this overlay for the neighborhood, and once both the city and the neighborhood and HENA have given their presentations, we will take a 5-minute break to allow live stream viewers to call in and get in the comment queue, at which point we'll come back. We'll take in-person questions and comments first, followed by callers. We will then typically respond to questions and comments once everyone has had an opportunity to speak. Much like we follow city council rules, so everyone gets 3 minutes to speak, and after that, you get the shepherd's hook and dragged off stage. Let's see. So in terms of the process overview, so we treat this like any other major application, major planning application. It would go through the same process as a rezoning application, which means city council is the one who will approve it ultimately. So they're the final decision maker. We're still in the pre-application process, so we don't have an application under review yet. Longmont requires that a neighborhood meeting be held before an application is submitted. Do that for a few reasons. One of those is so that we all can kind of understand what some of the community concerns might be up front, so that they could maybe get addressed sooner rather than later. It's always easier to do it that way. Following this meeting, HENA will be able to submit an application for a conservation overlay district in the neighborhood, at which point it would be reviewed by planning and development staff, members of the development review committee. And then once that happens, and once we've finalized our reviews, we would make a recommendation to Planning and Zoning Commission, who would hold a public hearing, and then they would make a recommendation to City Council, who would then hold their public hearings and be the final decision maker. So there will be notice at 3 different points in the application process. First point was before the neighborhood meeting. Notices are required to be mailed and posted 14 days ahead of the neighborhood meeting. There are times when the Director of Planning and Development may adjust the required notice area if warranted. So normally zoning applications require that property owners within a 1,000-foot radius of the boundary for an area proposed for rezoning be notified by mail. But in the present case, we agreed that it was appropriate to limit mailed notices to property owners within the proposed conservation overlay zone. So, the question of the night, what is a conservation overlay? So, it is defined in the Land Development Code. The citation is up there. It's in section 1503050B. A conservation overlay district is a zoning tool for maintaining neighborhood character. It provides context-based development standards for things such as height and setback and lot coverage that are based on averages on a block. So rather than having a single standard for an entire zoning district, we're looking at more of a block by block context. It also would include architectural compatibility standards and would apply to new construction, including additions and accessory buildings within the district. It is not a historic district. There would not be any historic preservation review unless your home is a designated landmark and you are seeking to do alterations to the exterior that materially changed the property. So this is not a historic district. This is a zoning tool. So it won't get into paint color and specific design, specific architectural details. It's more about general ideas of compatibility. Who determines that? I'll get there in a moment. So this is where I say bear with me. So there are a few different tools dealing with compatibility. Ultimately, it would be probably done at a staff level with specific criteria in place. So the other thing to note about a conservation overlay, it does not change the permissible uses in a district. So it won't take away any uses that you're currently allowed to do. Everything stays the same. There are just some additional development standards that would apply. So who can initiate a conservation overlay? Yes, ma'am?
What's the difference between that and what we have now?
I'll get there.
Okay.
I'm about to give you far more information than you ever thought you wanted to know, but it's important to give you just so you have that context of what we're doing. So I'll get there. Just give me a few minutes here. So who can initiate a conservation overlay? So it can either be a registered neighborhood group, such as HENA, or it can be someone with written evidence that 50% or more of the property owners in the proposed district agree with the conservation overlay. So this is an or, not an and. One of the other criteria for whether an area is eligible for a conservation overlay is that at least 75% of the proposed district must be developed already. That's the case here. This is not a city-initiated process. This is a community-driven process. It is not something that the city is not initiating this application. So I think that's important to say. This is a community-driven process. So there are 4 findings, what we call findings, basically standards that must be made for conservation overlay in addition to our standard review criteria that we look at. First one is, does the district retain the general character and appearance of its original period of development? Is there evidence of ongoing maintenance of existing buildings or potential for rehabilitation of existing buildings? Is it in pretty good shape, basically? Are there existing or potential development pressures for redevelopment and new development in the district? And is there a significant degree of continuity in terms of the built environment? So are we seeing a ton of vacant lots? Do we see it mostly developed? Those are the things we would look at. So the area in question is the area outlined in red. So the proposed conservation overlay district is the residential single-family zoned properties that are generally bound by 9th Avenue on the north, Martin on the west, or Martin on the east, that west side of Emery Street, and then there's a variable southern boundary based on the residentially zoned areas. It's about 150 acres. Contains a little bit more than 775 properties, so it's a pretty good size area.
You said residential properties. Does that include the commercial buildings?
So we're only looking at the areas zoned for residential single family.
Single family. So the multifamily units are exempt from this overlay?
No, they would not be. It's everything within this particular zoning district. So there are some non-conforming buildings that are in there, and really we would really only be looking at new construction. So infill, additions, new accessory buildings such as detached garages, accessory dwelling units, etc. So, all right, this is where I'm going to get in the weeds. So I apologize for the small font and the detailed dump, but here we go. So the first question, so one of the reasons, and Sharon and Bob and Rick will talk a little bit more about this, one of the reasons for this requested conservation overlay is there was a shift in the zoning under our 2018 zoning code update. Prior to the 2018 code update, Historic Eastside had a zoning district known as residential low density established. I'll be saying RLE from here on out. That had some specific standards as well, but it was a district that was really particular to the Historic Eastside. In 2018, the zoning was changed to residential single family. So I'm gonna go a little bit into that. So what changed? The intent, I have basically the intent of the original RLE versus RSF. RLE was intended for older neighborhoods. RSF is basically intended for primarily single-family neighborhoods, which Historic Eastside is. There was an increase to allowable density across the city. So it wasn't just Eastside. So citywide, there were some adjustments in the allowable density based on best practices, based on existing conditions, et cetera. So the maximum density currently in the Historic Eastside is 8 units per acre. That would not change. Again, we're not changing allowable uses. We're not changing allowable density. Uses by right are actually the allowable uses are actually more restrictive now than they were under RLE. So previously, you could do single-family residential, affordable housing, daycare, certain types of group homes by right. You could do a conditional use, go through a conditional use approval for additional types of group care, townhomes, 2 to 4 unit dwellings, places of religious assembly, also known as churches. We did change some of the definitions, so some things aren't necessary. I mean, it sounds different, but they're kind of the same. Currently, only single-family residential is allowable, in addition to accessory dwelling units. There is no option to build a new duplex or a new triplex or a new quadruplex as a conditional use. And additionally, the permissible conditional uses are a bit more limited now as well. More than what I have listed. I will ask if you can hold your questions, because I'd like to get through this, and that way we can have everyone on the record with their questions, just from a administrative standpoint. So bear with me, if you don't mind. The accessory uses are basically the same. We allowed ADUs before, we allow them now. We allowed home occupations before, we allow them now. So the dimensional standards changed. The front yard was reduced as part of the rezoning, as part of the citywide rezoning code update. Previously, it was 20 feet, now it's 15 feet. And then there's also some variation on if you have an alley-loaded garage versus a front-facing garage. Side yards, we had affordable housing was a separate category. It's all the same. It's all housing now. So I'm not really going to get into that. Side yards were a ratio. So it wasn't a straight, simple number. It was a ratio based on your building height. Now it's just 5 feet for a side yard for an interior lot. The goal in 2018 was really to simplify a lot of these standards, because to really improve predictability is really a lot of what was being done. So ditto, your rear yard, you had some additional, if you had an alley, you have 6 feet. The rear yards really didn't change. The accessory building setbacks were definitely strange. So at this point, accessory building setbacks are 5 feet for anything that's over 120 square feet. So basically your garages, your accessory dwelling units. If you're putting in like a tough shed, 3 feet. So in terms of residential design, let me see, there was something else I missed on here. Bear with me here. Yes, one thing I did not note is that building height maximum was 30 feet. Now it's 35 feet, and that's across all single-family residential zoning districts. There was a decrease in lot size from 5,500 square feet for single-family lots to 5,000 square feet, with 4,000 square feet permitted if there was an alley garage access. The minimum lot width did decrease from 60 feet to 50 feet for properties without an alley access. And I think that's important to note, because just based on a preliminary analysis of lot widths in the historic east side, 50 feet is pretty standard. So 60 feet was more than what a lot of the existing lots are. So the RSF district actually brings a lot more of those lots in conformance. One other thing to note is neither the RLE zone nor the RSF zone have lot coverage standards. And what that means is some cities, some codes say you can't have more than 35 or 40% of your property covered by buildings. We only deal with bulk in terms of height and setbacks and such. So we don't get into lot coverage. We didn't do it under the previous code. We don't do it now. So residential design standards specific to the RLE zone didn't specifically transfer to the RSF zone, but there is a master list of residential design standards that apply to all new residential development in the city of Longmont. So really, we took a lot of those standards and applied them citywide. Block averaging for new construction is actually permissible in both the previous RLE and the current RSF districts. In the previous RLE zone, block averaging for setbacks would apply if the average was less than the minimum. Now we basically say that you can do the average if more than 50% of the lots are developed. You can take that averaging approach. Scale, particularly compatible bulk and massing, is not necessarily part of the RSF standards that are in place, but they are included as part of the general residential design standards. So as I noted, residential design standards now apply to all new residential development regardless of what zoning district you're in. Neighbor compatibility is part of our general residential zoning standards and does include design and development standards that are comparable with the previous RLE specific standards. There is a bit more specificity in terms of the RLE code calling out doors and windows. Currently, it's under our general residential compatibility standards, we look at building materials and colors, roof forms, which would include pitch and material, overhang style. So, for example, is a barrel tile Mediterranean roof appropriate on a block that's mostly pitched roof shingle? With pitched roofs with shingles? Probably not. That's the sort of comparison we would make. And again, we would look at building massing and style as well. Compatible building materials is something that was previously part of the code as well. So what would a conservation overlay do? How would that all relate? So basically it would provide contextual standards for new construction, including, as I mentioned, additions and accessory buildings. The key difference between these contextual standards and the current standards that apply for all residential development really is the lot coverage standard. As I noted previously, we don't have lot coverage standards in our standard residential or any other zoning districts under either the current code or the previous code. Did a pretty exhaustive code analysis as part of this presentation. So basically, contextual standards, building height, you could do anything between the maximum building height limit in the district, which would be 35 feet, and the height of the buildings on adjacent lots. So somewhere in between there. And that's for the conservation overlay. That would apply across conservation overlay zones. Setbacks, you could do as I mentioned, you would do the average setback on a block where more than 50% of setbacks are less than the minimum required by the underlying zoning. This is pretty similar to what the RLE called for. But again, we do also have that averaging ability under the current code standards as well. Lot coverage is really the big development standard. In conservation overlays, you would look at the average lot coverage on a block, and you would be able to do anything between 50 and 125% of the average lot coverage on your block. So what you could build would really kind of be dependent upon what's already there. So I just want to give a fairly straightforward math example on how this block average would work. So if you have a lot on a block with an average lot coverage of 20%, so say your block is 20%. If you want to build a new structure, such as a garage or an accessory dwelling unit, or put an addition on your existing home, your total lot coverage would need to be between 10 and 25% at the end. Now, if your lot already exceeds the average coverage, you might be kind of stuck. You might not be able to do anything else. And that's a consideration as this process moves forward. So if you already, because average means you're going to have some below and some above. So that's really what you would be looking at. We would have to do that mathematical analysis, looking at what that lot coverage is on a block by block basis.
Are the apartments included in this average, or it's just the
Yes, everything on the block would be included in the average. So everything would be included. So we also have the architectural compatibility requirements within a conservation overlay zone, that at least 3 of these features listed be similar to other buildings on the block. These standards are, like I said, pretty similar to existing residential design standards for all zoning districts, though the conservation overlay standards do specify windows, doors, porches, and porticos as architectural elements that need to be considered as well. Again, these standards would only apply for new construction. The code does permit additional neighborhood-specific guidelines to be developed as part of a conservation overlay application, but HENA is not seeking to include anything beyond the standard guidelines for a conservation overlay district. So you would need to do 3 of the 4. You would need to either have, looking at roof slope and overhang, exterior building materials, window and door openings, shape, size, and alignment, and front porches or porticos. So the building materials, shingle, cedar shake shingle, lap siding versus brick versus stucco. If there's an odd adobe in there. There are very few of those, but they exist. So those are the types of things we would be looking at. So at this point, I am going to turn the floor over to Sharon and Bob and Rick, and if you'll bear with me for 1 second, I will get your presentation pulled up. So, just say go forward, backward, just with the click. That's probably the best way I could
Okay.
use, I would think.
First of all, I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of a probably too busy schedule to come here. I think we all chose to live in the historic East Side neighborhood for more similar than dissimilar reasons. I think the architecture, the old house, and the need to invest a lot of money in rehabbing it was a common thread. The wider streets, the big shade trees. So I think we have more things in common than not. We're Longmont's oldest neighborhood. You may notice that many of our homes on the east and west streets, so think of like 6th Avenue in between Martin Street to Emery Street. That's the only thing that looks a little bit different. The city of Longmont did not want to have urban sprawl. So what they did was they subdivided those end lots. So in between there, you see more of bungalows and craftsman style houses, but they kind of wanted to keep Longmont nice and tidy. Okay, so up forward.
There you go.
So then, Bob, I think it's you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So why don't we just both kind of stay up here?
I thought I probably want to use this microphone.
Oh, okay, sure.
We got the up mic.
It's about scale. It's all about scale.
Okay.
Okay, well, it really is wonderful to see so many friendly faces in the audience. Thank you all for coming out. But the area, as Jennifer said, the area that is covered is the part that's zoned residential, single family, and it's within, on my map, the green boundary. So it's no commercial areas, no, it is just the part of the neighborhood that's zoned residential single family. And the clicker is here. Okay. All right. So Longmont was founded as a Chicago, Colorado colony it's one of two communities that were successful colonies. The other one is Greeley. So a group of people from Chicago, a group of families, came here and in the midst of nothing, put down roots and started the city of Longmont. So it was originally the west side and the east side looked very similar. So that the west side runs to Bowen from the Kaufman, Cherry area, and the east side runs from Emory to Martin, and they were very similar in appearance. And then the train came, so when they plotted the route for the railroad, they couldn't go up the steep hills on the west side, so the east side became the area that the train went through, and that resulted in, we were forever changed after that. So, you can imagine what it was like with the cinders and the smoke and the noise from the train. We still have noise from the train, it turns out. There you go. So 2 years after the city was founded, the train came. So from that moment on, people that became more wealthy in town could afford to move to the west side and build a larger house, and they were happy to leave the east side. Yeah, you can understand that. So the net result was that the east side was zoned in the 50s or early 60s for mostly R3, which allowed apartment buildings, professional office space, and parking lots. The west side was zoned for R1, which is single-family homes at the time. So we had three original schools in Longmont. There was Columbine Elementary, Bryant School, and Central School. So Bryant was located on Longs Peak and between Collier and Emory Streets, and Bryant was demolished and replaced with an apartment building, or several apartment buildings. So because the west side and east side differed in zoning, the west side was able to remain R1, the east side was zoned for apartments. And in the early 1980s, there were two condo projects that were built, and those of us that lived in the neighborhood at that time realized how vulnerable all of our homes were, that there was a chance for tearing down homes anywhere in the neighborhood, and there was no recourse against that. So we created a legal petition and asked for the city council to change the zoning to R1, which was single-family homes. City council declined, but a new zone was created, which was RLE, or Residential Low Density Established. It included some architectural controls on roof pitch, overhang, and materials, and it influenced the size and shape of alignment on the structures that were located on both sides of a block. So the west side remained R1. Let me.
You want to
Oh,
go back?
thanks. And the question is, how do we get back?
There we go.
There we go.
Use the wheel.
Okay, great. So the RLE zone changed what could be built in the neighborhood. And the single-family homes were used by right, and duplexes and triplexes were a conditional use. So we had a number of very contentious meetings when citizens appeared to protest or make comments on the design of duplexes or triplexes. So we really needed to. We benefited greatly from the change to RSF, which allows single-family zoning only. Well, we have the west. You see at the picture on the bottom, there are 3 houses there on the edge of Thompson Park. These are in the west side. So you can see the house on the left has is a kind of a traditional early 1900s house. The house in the middle and on the right side of the picture are drastically different. Those houses on those lots were raised, and then the new houses were built in its place. So these, to our way of thinking, these new houses stick out like a sore thumb, and they take away from the uniform look of the neighborhood. So the director of the Longmont Museum has said that the east side has the largest concentration of houses from our early development period. So we are a treasure to be preserved rather than something to be scrapped. So we had to become very organized in accomplishing the projects. So we published regular newsletters, we had representatives on every block, and the neighbors were appointed. Our neighbors were appointed to many city boards and commissions. I was on the planning commission after that stretch. So the east side became a model for other neighborhoods, and HENA was the first registered neighborhood group. So we have led the way in a lot of the activities that we have done to try to save the neighborhood. Okay.
Oops, I went through. So I think if you ever are driving around and preferably walking around the east side as well as the west side, they're both historic areas, but there's a huge contrast. And I think that is reflective of the fact that we had that RLE zoning. So people came in, purchased a home, started fixing it up, adding an addition or whatever, but there were some nice soft guidelines about keeping the historic look from the front. I always use the analogy, it's like a mullet. You keep it historic on the front, you can party in the back, but we don't want to see the party, you know, we want to keep that curb appeal. And I think that oftentimes that's why people choose to live here. It is the curb appeal, and we want to keep that historic preservation. So we had that, and the city wanted to streamline zoning. And we met as a committee with them on multiple occasions, and our concern was that if we just went to RSF, we would look more like the west side rather than the fact that for 30-plus years, we have been able to maintain that historic look. So COVID came and went, and they never met with us to look at what sort of guidelines we could put in. And we decided once again now we have to take action. So that's what we're doing right now. We want to preserve the look we have. We don't want to handcuff anybody, but we want people to be thoughtful if they're going to put in an accessory dwelling or they're going to put in an addition on the back of their house. You know, a lot of our homes over here, because they're the original lots, are extremely long and narrow. And we want to keep that curb appeal, that look. We have done historic tours. The west side is featured all the time with the museum for tours, and lo and behold, the east side never was. And we're like, what? You know, it's important that people, you just don't save the old. I mean, you just don't save the grand, I'm sorry. And I think it's important for people to see the reflection of Longmont's humble beginnings. And as people made it, you see the grander homes. And I think that's just a part of life. And I think we try to preserve it all. Okay. So, neo-traditional architecture, it's like contemporary architecture that borrows from the historic past, but it's not historic. So what I think of, that's really popular right now, and if you think of Prospect, that's kind of what Prospect did. And that whole bringing the front porch back also, we had it first, folks. We had the front porch, we had good planning happening over here. Again, we just want to maintain it. A recent addition, because the setbacks changed, I always like the setbacks in that we have neighbors, but they're not too close. And there's a little area between us. Where some of the apartments went up, you know, they're literally looking into the original home's backyard. So with the new zoning that's in place, the setbacks have been reduced. And I think that's been an asset of our neighborhood. And that was another reason why I wanted to work towards trying to get some sort of zoning put back into place. A developer wanted to demo an east side home and subdivide it and put two mobile. We'll move the one house, the present house over, and then bring in a mobile home. Modular, thank you. I mean, I don't know, I think that's awkward. So another reason why we want the conservation overlay zone. The other thing was we weren't even notified. We did not get notification that that house was up for proposal. So I think what we want to do is reestablish the communication. And so the city used to send us, if someone was doing a remodel, they would just send us the plans. We would just give input. Did we have power? No. We just made suggestions. We want to keep that door open. We want to work with planning, and we want planning to work with us. We don't want to shut things down, but we also don't want things demolished. There's no penalty, no substantial penalty if a house is demolished, except maybe, oops, or I'm sorry. Reasons for demolishing homes, sometimes they talk about the structural foundation. I don't think there's a home in our neighborhood that does not have structural foundation problems. Just like my body sags, my house sags. So it's just a fact of longevity. I would prefer to keep longevity. Okay, so Rick, you're up.
Thank you. So, speaking to the slides, I guess. Jennifer covered a lot of what the conservation overlay would do. And she'd mentioned where you can go if you want to bludgeon your brain and go online. You can go to the city website and you can type in there city code and it'll pop up, and you can go to 15.03.050B, Section 5, and you can see all the details if you haven't done it already. And I encourage you to. I just wanted to run through that really quick. But basically, what we want to do, what they mentioned was that basically this neighborhood has a long history of being proactive proponents for the neighborhood. Okay, I'll back up a little bit further. The east side and west side are very different when you go through them, obviously. We all know that. The east side had the train. The east side was closer to the cannery. The east side was closer to the sugar factory. The east side had the noise and the business and became blue collar. And as it aged, it sagged, and we had a lot more minorities in the neighborhood. And frankly, I think it's been discriminated against. And the neighborhood association has formed to help support the neighborhood in the eyes of the city. And I think the city's been doing a lot better, by the way. But we're supporting the neighborhood in the eyes of the city and for everybody here. And it started with the RLE zoning, and it's continuing, I think, with the conservation overlay. But getting back to the conservation overlay, if you go to that website and you look at it, it talks about several specific points. One is setbacks, which I don't think are an issue for us. Most of our houses are set back more than the minimum. It talks about building height, okay? One thing that Sharon didn't mention, there's more development pressure all the time, right? All our real estate is becoming more expensive. There's been one house scraped, an 1880s house scraped on Emery Street, and they put in a sort of old-looking house that doesn't look old. It fits in a little bit, but really I would have personally preferred to have the other house. I don't know how you feel, but that's something to think about. There's another house that's been developed that has taken up, without any zoning variances, taken up the entire lot, essentially, okay? Because if you look at these zoning restrictions, and we can have, that the setbacks have become very small. And we can do that to every single lot that we own in the east side right now. And think of what this would look like without any yards, our neighborhood. But so the overlay district, it would affect setbacks maybe. It affects building height. If you look in Denver, you look in Boulder, oh my gosh, in Boulder, they take cute little neighborhoods, they scrape these little homes, and they put up these mansions, right? Longmont's not there yet, but we might get there. We should be proactive and prevent that from happening, in my opinion. So the conservation overlay would look at building heights for any new buildings. It looks at architectural design, compatible in multiple ways, as Jennifer pointed out. It talks about site development, okay? That includes preserving trees. That's part of the conservation overlay. I think everybody who lives in this neighborhood appreciates the tree coverage we have, and we want to maintain that as part of our character. That's not in the current zoning, but it would be in the conservation overlay. It would maintain solar access to adjacent properties, again, being compatible with the other homes. And then it would also, there's a section that says it preserves historic or distinct features, okay? If a home appears historic or culturally significant, it doesn't have to be a landmark designated home, but if it appears to be significant in terms of architecture or history somehow, they would like to preserve it to the maximum extent feasible. Now that's very soft wording, but that also points to values we have, right? We want to preserve the buildings, not scrape one because the foundation is inadequate and put in something new that's a little bigger, that might fit the code, but it's not the same. You can't replace an 1880s building, okay?
How would this help us preserve that house on the 800 block of Road?
I'm gonna follow up on that. Demolition.
She's smarter than I am. She'll answer that. Okay. Anyway, so I want to slide this forward here. That was backwards. All right, there we go. So again, limiting lot coverage. This is a recent development in our neighborhood, which you may know. I'm not going to point it out, but Google is amazing, and they caught this in construction. You can see the lot, and you can see the house. Do you see a yard? There's a little bit in the front. There's nothing else. This was built without any zoning variances under the current RSF zoning. And this is what we could all look forward to if development pressure continues. Okay? So that's something I think is very important to look at. The CO code it's broad guidelines, it's brush strokes. You could say it's vague. I say it's flexible. But it encodes values we currently have in our neighborhood so that they are preserved. I think there's one more slide for me to blather about, right? Yes. The East Side architecture, I do think, is a very unique asset worth preserving. And we do have increasing market pressures. I don't see an end to that. I don't know if you do. But there will be more development. There will be more scrapes and rebuilds. There will be more build-outs to the property lines if nothing else is done to prevent that. So a district, the Conservation Overlay District does provide a path to ensuring that new construction can happen, but it won't detract as much from our community.
Thank you, Rick. I just quickly want to point out, just one more time, if we do nothing, we could get more of that.
Yeah. That's your bullet. They get the front and they carry in the back. Isn't that what you asked for?
But the other things like your setbacks, things like that, and space around it is a very important part of it. And then if you look at this one, that is an ADU that was added, and it just followed the lines of the home itself. So what I want to say,
Totally doesn't fit the lot coverage that you're proposing. That takes up way more than I would be allowed.
So if I may, because we are live streaming this meeting and we do have a format that we follow simply because of just for decorum and process and such, if we can hold our questions and comments until the official question and comment period, and everyone will have time to make their comments and ask their questions, and then we will get them addressed. Thank you.
so the last thought I would like to leave you all with is historic neighborhoods are lost one home at a time. Nobody goes in and demos a whole area. It just slowly erodes and happens one home at a time. I believe a historic neighborhood can be saved one home at a time, and that's why I'm pushing for a conservation overlay zone so that homes will be developed thoughtfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. I do want to follow up on a couple of items that came up regarding notifications. We had a lot of staff turnover and shortages. That got slipped through the cracks. There were some things that were lost in translation. We have since corrected that. We do also have anything on our Historic Preservation Commission agendas are posted a week ahead of time. The other thing on the demolitions that happened, that slipped through the cracks as well, there are two things that have been done. One, we had some very, very specific conversations with our building permit desk. So I'm also the Historic Preservation Commission staff liaison, so I wear a few hats in the department. So whenever any building permit now at this point, whether it's a demolition or anything comes through for any home that's 50 or more years, they'll send it to me and make sure it doesn't need to have historic preservation review. In terms of the demolition review, for example, the house at the corner of 9th and Baker, So our historic preservation code was amended earlier this year, specifically the section relating to demolitions and demolition reviews, to put in, again, some more of those checks. So what we now look at is if there is any building that is more than 50 years old, which is the threshold for historic preservation or historic landmark status, and it's within that original town plat, so the original 1 square mile of the city of Longmont. If there is a proposed demolition of any building meeting those criteria, they get forwarded to historic preservation staff for review. I review it with typically the commission chair, and we'll make a determination of whether or not the commission as a whole needs to review that. If the commission as a whole does review it, there are a few different routes that it can go. But I will say one of the things that our commission does well is offer suggestions and guidance as well, because we do have a number of subject matter experts, including architects and builders and such on the commission. So there are some additional checks and balances that have been put into place to ensure that demolition of significant properties in the neighborhoods, and especially within our original town plat, don't slip through the cracks. So with that, give me one moment. All right, at this point, we're going to shift into the public comment period. So from a few administrative standpoints, we have some ground rules. As I mentioned, we follow city council rules. Everyone gets 3 minutes. We do ask that you state your name and address for the record. We also ask that you keep questions and comments related to the current proposal, because this is we're trying to have a very focused meeting and also be respectful of everyone's time. We also ask if you would please be additive and not repetitive. So if someone's already made the comment or asked the question that you want, we are making a running list of questions and comments that are being asked, and we will address them once everyone has once all of the public comment has been given. So we will basically do a big batch answer. And as always, be respectful. That goes without saying, but sometimes it still has to be said. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to leave this particular slide up on the screen. So the 5-minute break is so that people who are on the live stream can have time to call in and get in the call-in queue. And so if anyone here needs to take a break, stretch their legs, we'll come back in 5 minutes. And we will take the in-person comments first, followed by the call-in. We'll have you come in up one at a time. I'll turn this microphone around so you'll come to the podium, and just keep it flowing as smoothly as possible. So we'll see you back here at 5 after 7. Thank you. all, we are gonna, it's been 5 minutes. We're gonna get started again. So if, all right, so here is how we're going to work the in-person. Usually for city council, you sign up to speak. We'll do a little bit more informal and just have folks come up one at a time, and you'll come to the podium to speak. What's that? You'll need to give your name and address for the record. You will also need to pull the microphone pretty close to your mouth so that A, we can hear you, so also the microphones pick it up, and the live stream and recording picks it up for posterity. So, our official countdown clock is not working, so I will have my phone timer on, and everyone gets 3 minutes, and I'm going to turn over the floor. So if you just want to come and queue up one at a time, and we'll try to keep it flowing. So if you're interested in speaking, I would say come down to one of the first couple of rows just to make it easy to get there. Over here.
Okay. Oh, excellent. Okay. Can I face the people like you were?
Sure.
Oh, awesome. The back of my head is better looking than my face. It's an improvement for you, but maybe not for me.
Here, speak
Yes.
directly into the microphone.
Okay. Does that work
All
for you,
right.
bud? Alrighty. Hi, my name is Mark Bowen, and I want to address the proposed conservation overlay affecting our city. Oh, yes, my address is 422 Atwood Street, Longmont. Okay, so I'm an electrical engineer who's worked in energy efficiency, culminating in working at the Department of Energy's Renewable Energy Lab. I worked as a project manager, managing research and code development for the DOE's residential buildings group. The biggest challenge was rolling back historical architectural compatibility requirements. These regulations force homeowners and developers to use outdated and energy inefficient building materials and designs. By imposing these restrictions, we lock ourselves into archaic practices with lasting environmental consequences. We see this. There's a wonderful article exploring San Francisco's window regulations, causing people to be unable to build, being locked into bad designs that cause huge environmental cost as people are wasting tons of energy on heating and cooling. We should be fostering innovation, not hindering it. The previous speaker described neo-traditional architecture as a threat, but it represents years of research aimed at advancing energy-efficient building practices. Point two, the Historical Neighborhood Association pushing this proposal represents only 25% of the affected area, yet they seek to impose regulations on the majority of property owners who aren't represented and may not agree. According to the city's regulations, for areas without a registered group, there must be evidence of support from over 50% of property owners. 75% of the area affected by this proposal does not have a registered neighborhood group. If the overlay is to apply to that unrepresented area, HENA must show that evidence of support. Additionally, this is regulation without representation. Additionally, while the previous speaker said we all made a choice to live in the historic East Side neighborhood, that isn't true. Most of this overlay impacts people who lacked the resources to move into the already wealthy and fully developed historic neighborhood. I live in the broader area affected by this overlay. As a young person early in my career, I bought a small, affordable home with the hope of developing it as my family grows. If this proposal passes, I wouldn't be allowed to match the richer area's lot coverage and taller houses. I'd be forced to build a small home that reflects a history of being quite literally on the wrong side of the tracks, and that I would be bound by the restrictions that they want to impose. My neighboring homes are small, and this little kid is now trapped and living in an 800 square foot home so that rich people don't have to worry about density. That's insane. Moreover, policies designed to limit densification, which, if you look at the HENA website, this is the goal, directly can contradict the priorities of the Biden-Harris administration, who have emphasized building more housing, increasing affordability, and addressing climate change. Thank you. I urge the city, prioritize fairness. Thank you.
All right. Keep.
He also lives at 422.
Let's keep the comments coming so we don't have the lulls. So, next speaker, please. I would say if you are interested in speaking, please go ahead and start queuing up. I would suggest coming down to one of the front rows, just to get in line.
Hello. Bethany Cooner. I live at 517 Baker Street in a cute bungalow. And my main concern is finding out how many properties in the 750 homes would be stuck because of those, that average of what's on your block. Because there are a lot of areas that have small homes on large lots. And for, to encourage more young families to be able to move in, to be able to walk downtown like I was with my kids, to go to Scrumptious and the restaurants and to keep those businesses viable, we need more people. So to be able to build, like they did on Atwood, where they made it look like a historic single-family home on the outside, but it's actually a triplex, and it brought 3 new families into our neighborhood and support our businesses. Things of that nature. And I know this isn't going to change the zoning, that we can't do multifamily or whatever, but I do think that, finding out that I suddenly now can't modify my home, I can't do an addition, I can't build an ADU for my aged parents to come and live with it because I'm out of luck with the, maybe I'm over my percentage, I don't know. So how do we find out how many homes are just going to be now told, sorry, you don't ever get to add an addition, you don't ever get to have an ADU, you don't get to have a garage, because we've decided that everything must be the same and nothing can change. I think that's something that people should be made aware of on a house-by-house basis before this goes through. Thank you.
Hi, Nate Doyle. I live at 510 Collier. And I think this is largely superfluous and has the potential to open the city up to lawsuits under takings, which will drain the city's resources as they try to help build out the city. That's all I have to say.
Looks close enough. Hi, I'm Paul Stark. I
usually need to get pretty close to it.
do it. Okay. Paul Stark, 702 Collier Street. It's the big yellow house on the corner across from the park, which you got a lot of you are probably familiar with. 2 points. One, it seems to me that this footprint restriction percentage is an issue that needs to be much more thoroughly examined. We did a huge remodel on our house about 10, 12 years ago. And our house sits in a corner lot, so I don't have the big, deep lot. And I don't know, but I think that I might have run afoul of that because the house was already taking up a substantial amount of the lot. And I think we might well have run afoul of that. We went to great trouble to make our house look almost identical to what it was before we did the remodel, sticking to the Victorian theme and everything. So certainly in the spirit of what this is talking about, but like I said, I wonder if we would have even been allowed to do it given this. So I think that 50 to 125% thing really needs some more examination. The other houses, if you go, I'm not sure I understand it exactly, but if you go up Collier Street, go up Collier to the north of me, all those houses are on big, deep lots, and they're pretty small houses. So I'm guessing that the amount of the percentage in that area around my house would be not very high, but because my house is on a smaller lot, so I think there's a real problem there that either the percentage needs to be bigger or that needs to be addressed on a house by house basis. I mean, it's over my pay grade, but it seems to me that there's a potentially really unfair problem. Point 2, and I'll be done. As somebody that grew up in Boulder, how terrible is it if people want to come in here and build $2 million houses in our neighborhood? I mean, it makes all of our properties better, makes the neighborhood, more attractive to other people. So, well, I'm already paying a lot more taxes. So doesn't seem like that ever gets addressed. But I'm just, it's a rhetorical question. I mean, obviously none of us has the answer, but, do we want, and to that point, there's some not very attractive houses on the east side that having them be scraped off might not be the worst outcome. So, I think the point here is that we need to worry about being too restrictive with this stuff. I mean, at this point, real estate's very expensive, and so people are putting a lot of investment into this, and I think we want to encourage that, Anyway, that's my 2 points.
Hi, Sarah Levison, it bends, okay. 634 Emory Street. Couple of questions, actually. Wouldn't Proposition 123 override any conservation overlay district? The governors densify everything. So, and then the other point I want to tell people is that when you get a property that covers most of the lot, when the drainage comes off the roof, doesn't the city have a rule that you can't use an adjacent property as your drain field? So there's already city restrictions that protect you from somebody next door to you destroying your foundation because they're putting all the water off their massive roof, that there's no land left to absorb the water, then it ruins your basement. So I'd be concerned about the total lot coverage. I also think that the historic East Side is the original tiny house neighborhood, and there are people that I think that we have an opportunity still in our neighborhood for people that have a larger home like I do, with my husband, and to still be able to move into something when we retire and don't want the big house anymore. But if everything is blown up, there's no opportunity for any of us to stay in the neighborhood. A last point that I want to make is that the neighborhood is so diverse with alleys that belong to the city. The alley behind my house does not belong to the city. So if the new rules go in place, I could build a garage even closer and no one would be able to move up and down the alley. The city wouldn't be able to collect the trash anymore. So I think we have to look at every block, of course, is a case-by-case basis. And those blocks that already have apartment complexes on them, we already knew, when the rules changed on us, it used to be 6 units per acre, now it's 8. So those blocks that already have those multifamily dwellings, we already know that we couldn't, even at 6 per acre or 8 per acre, we still can't add an additional unit. I also want to make the point that there are a lot of hidden accessory dwelling units the city doesn't know about. So I think we have more density than we even know. I know a house just one property over from us had an illegal ADU put in a generation ago. So I think we have to really get all the information about what every structure looks like right now. And I think there's great opportunity for people to still do things with their houses. I don't think this is a negative, but what it does is protects you from somebody building a monstrosity next door to you and devaluing your property. One other thing, there's a great article called Taming the Teardown that's published 20 years ago. There is a philosophy that's come true in Denver, is that when the teardowns start, even if you have a great house, your property only becomes worth the value of the lot. So properties will go down in value, you'll get scraped, and then you won't get what you want for your house.
My name is Cindy Vanover, and I live at 612 Emory Street. And I don't have a bunch of thought-out, well-designed points. I just wanted to kind of, share kind of my observations. I am somebody that walks my dog. Ooh, now I'm really loud. Do I have to repeat anything? You guys got... So, observations. I I've been walking, I've lived in our house since 1997, so we've been there a long time. And I walk all over both east and west side historic districts. And I do love where I live because of the aesthetic value and what I see. And I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. Having said that, I think what I'm struggling with here is that I think we do need to clarify and make it really understandable to all of us who don't exactly understand how we're impacted by this. That's where I struggle, because our house is less than 900 square feet right now. And it's an old house and I love it, but it's hard to have enough space, one bathroom for how many years? I think I get an award for that. But yeah, I would love, we're planning to do an addition and we're planning to do stuff. And like the young couple that was next to us, other folks already have it, and it makes me nervous to think that we can't also take advantage and build on our land, and ultimately it's going to be our retirement. We're hoping, right? Prices, it's an advantage. Having said that, I think there's a happy middle ground. Like I told my own husband who's designing our house, I don't like this thing. It doesn't seem like it's in a vibe with the neighborhood. So I think it's important to consider those things. What I'm not clear on is, but who exactly does make those decisions and how binding are they? And the whole coverage thing, I think I'm going to ask Matt to explain it to me later, because I'm not clear. But if I'm restricted because we have a little tiny house on a great big lot and we can't utilize that lot, that doesn't make sense to me. I want to be able to have the same advantage that other folks have had in order to, let's do the mullet. Let's keep it, very pleasing to the street. But if we want to have a place for our cars and stuff in the back, that seems to make sense to me. And it sounds like we could have maybe both. I don't think they're mutually exclusive, but I think maybe having an understanding and a better way to represent so that we can know who is impacted and what is that impact, that's going to help make this discussion, I think, a little bit easier, right? And have people understand what's viable and what's not. Thanks.
Hi there, Lauren Bowen, 422 Atwood Street. Thank you for putting on this meeting. So I am representing someone on Atwood Street in one of those little houses, surrounded by a bunch of little houses on large lots, and a lot of really ugly houses. So hearkening back to something someone said earlier, I think that, especially for Atwood in particular, instead of making development more difficult, it's a place where we actually should make development easier. It would serve us really well, and make it a better place to be. I think that the point that I have the most concern with is the lot coverage. My husband and I bought our little house on a big lot, specifically thinking, hey, because of the current zoning, we could build we can expand this, we can make this something that we can stay in with our growing family. And so, yeah, I have great concern with the lot coverage restrictions. A thought is, because maybe there are parts of this new code that could be a benefit, could it be amended? Could we change part of it to not have that lot coverage restriction? Yeah. Oh, and one thing, so back to the having a house that's very close to yours, your neighbor. I know, so I might as well say, for the water runoff, the correct way to do that is a French drain. So just having an underground pipe that runs to the street so that you don't have that water dumping in your foundation. That's what I got. sorry, one other thing. I think Atwood is an anomaly here, and so I would even be like, you guys do what you want with the rest of it, but leave Atwood out of it would be my desire.
Bing Sellers, 517 Baker. It seems like we have some really concerned people that moved into their place many years ago and like the look and like the trees and like everything. And I say, go team. But a lot of us moved into this neighborhood because it was affordable. we could afford it. And then all of a sudden, to be told, hey, you can't, you know, there are already a lot of restrictions. They restrict the front on what the pitch roof is and all of the other restrictions. So I think the town's doing a good job restricting and controlling. I don't see, I mean, in the past 10 years, how many big box houses have gone up? None. I haven't seen any. I do a lot of walking there. So I think the town's doing a pretty good job, and maybe these folks need some voice, and we could I mean, I think anytime houses get built, there's public notices and stuff go up, and so you know, and I think that's probably a good thing, but I think it's a horrible thing to restrict square footages. I mean, if you have a 700 square foot house on this side and this side, you can't do anything with your house with this new system, and that's not right. Let's not go there. And not only that, but if someone like us that bought the property and the zoning was such when we bought it, and all of a sudden you're going to change the zoning, that's illegal. That's wrong. I would sue. And there are going to be a lot of lawsuits happening. I mean, people, especially people that have bought property and then they want to do an addition and the town says, no, you can't because we got this new overlay. That's not going to fly. So again, I understand that. And it seems like you also have a vision of what you want your neighborhood to look like. How would you feel if there was another group that came in and said, our vision is new, modern square houses? How would you feel? You wouldn't feel very good. You don't want their ideas pushed on you. And do we want your ideas pushed on us? That's how we feel.
Are there any other folks here who would like to make some comments? All right.
Could I answer to some of that stuff now, or no? Wait later.
1 second. Dallas, are there any callers? Okay, we do not have any callers on the line, so. Here. So I will start with some of the responses and then let Rick and Bob and Sharon have a go at it as well. So the Historic Eastside Neighborhood Association boundaries are this red boundary. Those are the official boundaries with this that are registered with the city. So that is the HENA boundary area. That is what the conservation overlay district would be. It would not extend over to the west side at all.
Those are not the national.
It is not the National Register District. Correct. Yes. So this would be, that is something I probably should have clarified. So there is a National Register Historic District within the historic East Side. That is a much smaller portion of the neighborhood. National Register districts don't have the same kind of regulatory teeth that a locally designated historic district would. I'm not certain why the boundaries of the East Side National Register District are the way they are. That is some deep diving I need to do.
Actually, they're two different neighborhoods.
So But I would need to do a little bit more research on that. But yes, what we're looking at is not the National Register District. We're looking at the Registered Neighborhood Association boundary area. There definitely is some analysis that needs to be done. So we will ask that there be some analysis in terms of existing conditions as part of this, so that we know what the block averages are. So we can do our, so as city staff, we can evaluate the application. Let's see. Yeah, the lot coverage concerns were definitely, that's what we've been hearing the most of. There was a question about whether the state regulations would preclude the lot coverage restrictions. That is actually an outstanding question, and I've asked that question of our city attorney's office to see, to get an opinion on that. And the answer seems to be, it depends. This is something there's the ability within, especially the accessory dwelling unit legislation that was passed earlier this year. There is, you can do dimensional standards, so there's the thought that this could possibly translate into the dimensional standards, but we definitely need to do a deeper dive in terms of understanding where any additional square footage would be precluded, because it could be an issue, and that's a question. So that is a question I've asked of our city attorney's office. So we've done a preliminary look at that. So yeah, the answer is it depends. That's the challenge with this block by block approach is a lot of it is it depends. I have a preliminary opinion, and I'm going to talk to him a bit more about it this week.
What did the attorney say about future lawsuits over this?
So it's not taking away uses. It is something that would go through a public process. It's a provision within our land development code. Ultimately, city council is the one who would make the decision. So I can't really, I mean, conservation overlays are permitted. They are established around the country. The way ours is written is pretty standard for what you would see around the country. So they've passed legal muster as a general idea, as a general tool. They are a zoning-based tool. They're not a historic preservation tool. It's something that we need to look at, and this is definitely because city council is ultimately the decision maker on this. So we'll do some additional diving on some of the legal issues. But given that there is the provision in the code for it, it doesn't change the underlying zoning. So you wouldn't have your uses per se on their face go away. But it's definitely a good question. It's a very good question. And, like so many legal questions, it's a lot of, well, maybe, it depends. But ultimately, conservation overlays as a concept have passed legal muster nationwide in the state of Colorado. So, I mean, it's part of our code. It's a part of our code that just has never been applied for and used. Let me see. Yeah, those are the primary things I have on my list. Rick, you wanted to add a couple things? Well, the energy efficiency. Thank you. Thank you. That is something that our Historic Preservation Commission has had a lot of discussions about on a variety of circumstances. So energy efficiency is one of those interesting things. There are a number of things in terms of, leaky houses and increasing your efficiency that you can do that won't detract from the historic character of a home. There are different studies out there. There's a lot of different evidence. So, I mean, it's one of those where it's a topic of a lot of discussion in the community. So, we are looking at how we can deal with solar, put in some solar standards. I know the city of Denver has definitely put in some solar standards as well. in terms of, location and such, and profile and that sort. We can't preclude anyone from doing solar panels, but we can assist, we can provide guidance on how that can exist. But that is something, our commission has discussed at length is, efficiency standards. Now, that said, the Historic Preservation Commission is only going to weigh in on your home and any exterior modifications if you are a locally designated landmark. So that is what it comes down to. So if you're not a locally, and so if you don't know if you're a locally designated landmark, you probably aren't, but feel free to call me and I'll look it up.
Well, why don't you talk about the difference between, I think you really need to clarify, because I think a lot of people, the takeaway is they're thinking on the level of historic designation.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you talk about the difference between that and what we're asking?
Sure. Okay. So I'll just repeat the question. The question is, what is the difference between a conservation overlay and historic designation? It's a big difference. So historic designation is applied in two different ways. You either have a larger locally designated historic district. There's quite a high bar in our code to have one of those established. You can also have individual locally designated landmarks. So we do not have any locally designated historic districts in the city of Longmont. We only have locally designated landmarks. Historic Preservation Commission is going to weigh in on exterior building alterations under two conditions. If it's a locally designated landmark, or if you're proposing demolition of a building meeting the criteria established in the Historic Preservation Code. So if you're proposing to completely demolish a building that is more than 50 years old in the original town plat. This is a zoning tool, so we aren't going to, if you do not have a locally designated landmark and you want to put in high efficiency windows and do super efficient improvements to your house, there's really nothing stopping you. We will say, please don't do that, but unless you are a locally designated landmark, there is no teeth. So this is really looking at development standards with some general compatibility in terms of design elements, as opposed to really getting into the nitty-gritty of, are you using, is this wood, is this composite, what are you using? So it is different. It's similar, but it's different in the approach that's taken. So if your home is not a landmark, there is nothing stopping you from doing doing your high efficiency work. If your home is a landmark, there are a lot of ways to improve your efficiencies that will still meet the standards of the historic preservation standards. I won't take you down that rabbit hole. I can talk about it all night. That's not what we're here to talk about. So again, I think a lot of the efficiency, it gets back down to it depends. So if you're a landmark property, you're going to have more restrictions. I would say if you don't know whether or not you're a landmark, you probably aren't a landmark, because typically that's part of your title work. Your house may come with a plaque. Your realtor probably said, buy this local landmark. But if you have any questions, call me. Just reach out. I'm happy to research that. I'm also happy to point you in the direction. We have a lot of historic surveys on many, if not most, of the homes in the historic east side. So if you're looking for documentation on your house, I can provide that too. But in terms of the proposed overlay, we're still working. That's something we're still working on as far as the implications of the state legislation. We don't think it would run afoul of it at this point, but we're going to do some deeper diving on it, and we'll go from there. So, Rick, Sharon, Bob, anything that? Come to the microphone.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on a couple of things, but I guess you covered some of this. The first is, yes, it's not just 25% of us telling 100% of us what to do. We are your neighborhood association. You might have gotten a newsletter, you might not have periodically. You've been invited to picnics if you've gotten a newsletter. I have a website that, if you want to give me your email address, I can connect you to some local news. We're here for you. We're here for everybody. And there seems to be, at least with some people, a tone of conflict and don't shove this down our throat and anger. And that's not what this is about. This is about win-win. Can we make this work for everybody? Someone brought up the point, is this legal to do, you're changing zoning? Yes, this is changing zoning. That's why they have this process, and that's why we're having this first public meeting. There will be several other public meetings beyond this where you can also express your opinion. But the whole point of this was to get some feedback. Maybe we can modify this some and make it work better for everybody. I think we can make this win-win. Everyone has different values. Some people bought into the neighborhood because it was cheap. It's not cheap anymore, but you got your nest egg. Some people bought in because they like the trees, yes, or they like the architecture. Some people really appreciate the historic aspect of it. It's maybe unfortunate if some people bought it because it's cheap and they bought into the oldest neighborhood in town, and some people value the history and they want to preserve the history. That's a public conflict. That's something we're going to try to work out here and in future meetings. But I think we need to work together. This isn't an us versus them thing. It's not 25% telling 75% what to do. As far as efficiency, again, I want to echo what Jennifer said. I am on the Historic Preservation Commission. I was part of those conversations. I've done some research on this. I understand you work with this as well. I'd be glad to give you some websites if you'd like to give me your email address. I can show you that even in my home, which is historically designated, and I have to maintain my single pane windows, I can achieve approximately 90% of the efficiency of double pane windows with interior storm windows that are properly fitted. If you do not have a designated home, you don't have to worry about that. You can put in double panes. You can call the Anderson guy who's sending you mailers every 2 months and have that done. You can put in all the efficiency, the materials and design standards that you mentioned vary greatly from community to community.
Did you do a blower door test on your house?
Yes. I had an efficiency standard test done on my house, yes. And everybody, if anybody lives in this town in an old house, you should do that because you can come up with a lot of interesting data. Yeah. He said that I have a lot of leaks and I have to work on it, and I've worked on it, and I've reglazed windows and I've caulked along the floors, and I live in a solid brick home, so I don't know where the leaks are coming from outside except for on an addition and stuff. But anyway, I could talk to you about that. It's a continuing challenge, but efficiency is an important part of a value for all of us, and it's a growing value for all of us. But I do live in a historically designated home, and I'm thinking of putting solar panels on it. And guess what? In Longmont, you can do that. And I may be putting solar panels on my home very soon. I'm thinking about it. But so it varies from community to community. This is not very restrictive. You didn't see anything. If you go to that 15.05, whatever, go through that. There's nothing restricting what you do for materials for your house. There's nothing saying you can't put in double pane windows or put solar panels on your roof. But your roof, if you're going to build a new roof, it should match some, at least if you're going to use that as one of your criteria, it should approximate your old roof or approximate the prevailing architecture in the neighborhood. That's a win-win for everybody in the neighborhood, I think. You don't want to have an outlying house. I'm sorry? That's a judgment call. Could you put vinyl siding if other neighbors have wooden siding? Yeah, if you have a designated home, you cannot put vinyl siding on. But if you're not designated, in the past you've put vinyl siding on, and in the future, I don't think that would be a problem. The appearance would be similar. Metal siding, I don't know, it depends on the metal siding. But if you're going to put on, some ultra-modern sheets of metal, that might not fly. But again, I don't think that would be good for the greater good of the neighborhood either.
If you're the smallest lot on the block, and you have all these people around you, have big property, and then you're restricted because you have the smallest lot on the block.
Right. I'm hearing over and over and over that the square footage, the footprint issue is an issue. And to be honest, it was an issue for me when we approached this at first. I happen to have one of the biggest lots on the block, but I also have a bigger than average house. And I can't put an ADU in my big backyard because my house is already 125% of what is on the block. So it works against the large homes, and it can work against small homes if you have a row of small homes. I agree that's something we should work on, and I'm glad everyone brought that up here.
We don't have a row of small homes. We just have a small house on a small piece of property in the middle of other homes that have bigger property.
Right.
They would never let you build more anyway. With the city standards, they're not going to let you build a 4,000 square foot ADU. I mean, in our house, we live in a block where there are already 4 ADUs and an apartment building. We cannot ever add an ADU to our property, even though we have room.
No, they changed that in the zoning.
So
Every single family home can have one ADU.
if it,
But it's not, it's every home can have one ADU. They changed that. It was that way before.
So ADUs do not count against density. They don't count against the density calculation as we calculate density in the city of Longmont. We do not fact.
Aren't they still a dwelling
Te-
unit? It's 8 units per.
Technically, it's a dwelling unit. However, we consider it as an accessory, so we don't count them towards the density.
But we could then take our house, because we're like a 2-story, we could put 3 apartments to buy our house up in that.
No, not in the zoning district. No, you could not divide your house up. You could do an accessory dwelling unit meeting our accessory dwelling unit standards. Happy to discuss those offline. Feel free to reach out to me.
We have massive foundation issues, and we had a structural engineer say that our home has a max of 30 years left. At the end of that 30 years, if this passes, we wouldn't be able to demolish because it was built in 1906. Our neighbors in that house, they would not be able to demolish. We'd be trapped with a meth lab forever.
should we repeat the question? For
Sure. So just to repeat the question, so the question is, their house has been evaluated by a structural engineer. The foundation is estimated to have 30 years of life left. There is a meth lab next to them. So with regard to the meth lab, there is an exception in the demolition code that if it is determined by the building official or the fire marshal to be a safety hazard, that can be demolished without review. It doesn't override. It doesn't override. It's an overlay.
One of the points here says that if there's a conflict between development standards, this takes priority.
Sure. So the demolition code is a separate from a development standard. So that's, I mean, I can get a legal interpretation, but we would consider that to be separate, and public safety trumps everything else.
If demolition code is separate, why is there something restricting demolition here? Like, a huge part of this is preventing scrape-offs. So are you saying that those
So it's less about, so the scrape off question is, how I've seen it in other communities, the concern was scrape off and replacement with a home that was substantially larger and completely out of character. They work in tandem. So they're slightly different. They have different goals. So the demolition code, if a property is determined to be a hazard, if you have documentation from a structural engineer saying your foundation is toast and your home is no longer safe, safety trumps everything. That's what it comes down to. Trust me, that is the amount of our development standards just citywide that are public safety really is a driving factor in our decisions. So if you have a meth lab next door, clearly that's a safety hazard. If it can't be remediated, then yeah. So at this point, I would say, let me put my email address on the screen here.
HENA? Members? HENA, tomato, tomato. Well, about 775 homes.
No, I mean, how many people are in the?
Everybody. There's no secret handshake or funny hat you have to wear. Just the fact that you're here, you are part of the association, whether you participate or not.
So,
Well, right now it's everybody here. But right now, as far as organizing it and planning it, initial plans were made by the three of us and one other. But this is something that's been in process since the previous zoning change, because back then we talked about preserving what we had before. We've had these kind of restrictions for over 30 years and no one noticed it, right? RLE1 greatly mimics what we're doing here. But we all had that for 30 years. No one complained, it never bothered them.
2018 and was told I can't have an ADU because of block density. Now that that's changed, I think that's a good thing, because now I could have an ADU, however, it has to be half the size of my house, so now you're getting down, and with your
Right.
small 800 square foot house, now you got a 400, I mean, that, there should be some flexibility there too, like.
so there is a variance process for, there are various processes out there, as they exist currently for ADU size. Ultimately, my contact information is up here for planning related questions. I also have Sharon's contact information as well. A lot of the questions and concerns we need to do a little deeper dive in them. I would encourage you, if you have deeper concerns and specific questions, please write me an email so I can have something written in the record, in addition to the videotape meeting. So, because I'm hearing a lot of your concerns. Sounds like the question with regard to HENA is maybe how many active members they have and how many board members.
You don't know.
Signatures and say that 50% or more of the neighborhood wants it, then it can be 3 people.
Okay, it's not. So let's just all take a pause and a deep breath. The whole reason for the meeting tonight was to educate people with a proposal. And so far it's working. We're getting a lot of questions. We're getting some answers. I want to address your concern because I share your concern. But for 35 years, we had a zoning. The city came in 2018, and you know what, guys? This zoning is not that different from what was taken away from us. We're just asking for it back, but I'm going to tell you, I feel your pain. I feel your pain because the city just came in and for logistics purposes, ease of a job, they just took it away from us. And that's when the dialogue started about what made the historic East Side so special and different than the West Side. That's where it started. So we have just invited you to the dance. Nobody's partnering up yet. It's about education. The other thing is this just can't happen in isolation. It goes to vote. I mean, we are very much handcuffed by the city on what we can do and what we can't do. And that's the point that we're working from right now. So let's work together. One of our greatest concerns was the lot calculation that the city has, and we thought it was so unfair. We said, people have tiny homes on big lots. This is unfair. They could put an accessory dwelling in the back if you were to tweak this. And the city said, no way. So right away from the start, we were compromising with the city on what we could do and what we couldn't do. And just to move forward and get the party started so we could dance, we made some agreements. This is the first step. No one is dancing yet. It's the first step.
And I also will clarify on the lot standard. to do anything other than what is allowed in the conservation. So the lot coverage requirement is spelled out in the conservation overlay section of code. What that means is to do something other than that 50 to 125% would require an amendment to that section of code outside of anything that HENA is trying to do.
Not a variance. It wouldn't be like you could take your plans to the city council and ask for variance. It would have to change the code.
So if there were a conservation overlay, if a conservation overlay were applied, the only way to vary from the lot coverage standard I described is we would have to change that section of the code. Just full stop. There's really no way to vary for a variance from it.
Do all the time. They say,
Yeah.
this is the national code. We're going to change it because we want it different.
And that's something we can definitely look at. It will take some time. It will definitely take some time. It's something we'll need to look at, though.
It said, part of this says that we, as a neighborhood, can ask for specific changes in our restrictions. Can we use that section to request a change without having to change the city code?
No, because those neighborhood-specific standards are in addition to the baseline standards. Yeah, exactly. They're in addition to those baseline standards. So that is something, that's something we can definitely look at. So, but with that, I would encourage everyone to reach out, send me an email with your comments, reach out to Sharon and Bob and Rick. I think this is a really great opportunity to get more involved with your neighborhood organizations as well. So I'll make that plug. Sure.
Because this is a discussion, and I think that's great. And I think people should, assume positive intent. I don't think anybody's necessarily trying to blow up somebody else's. But I understand there's a lot of discussion that needs to happen. But so since this is a proposal, how do I know even now what I can and can't? Now I'm actually confused about, is it block by block? Do I have to find out?
Currently, it is not block by block. So the question is, how do you find out now what you can do currently to your property? So currently, all of the standards of the residential single-family zoning district would apply. All of the standard land development code development standards would apply. If you have specific questions, please reach out to us. We always have a planner on duty on call who can answer specific questions about your property. And so, for example, if you're interested in doing an ADU, we can help you determine what your maximum square footage would be that you could do without going through any sort of variance process. Currently, ADUs are you can do up to 50% of the floor area for your primary structure. So yeah, if you've got an 800 square foot house, you could do a 400 square foot ADU, and that's. And then, yeah, you also have to factor in your setbacks as well and make sure you're meeting your setbacks. So it would be driven by your setbacks and the size of your existing home. But feel free to reach out. The general planning number is going to be, the general planning department number is 303-651-8330. Again, that is 303-651-8330. So if you have questions specific to your property and what you can do now, call that main number and we'll get you to a planner on duty who can help make that determination for you. If you have questions specific to the conservation overlay, reach out to me. If you have questions about historic preservation and whether or not your house is a landmark, reach out to me. Or you can just reach out to me in general and I'll get you to the right place. So I think we should, at this point, because I know Sharon and her team had some additional items to discuss with the community that are not related to the conservation overlay. So in the interest of keeping the live stream pertinent to the conservation overlay, I think.
Okay, I just want to say one thing to the group in general. I ask that any question you have that you want to send to me, you include Jennifer. I'm not going to respond to one-on-one questions. I don't want anyone playing mom against dad.
Yeah.
We're a team. We're both parents, okay? So if you have a question that Jennifer can specifically answer about your property, she's the right person about your property. But as far as the conservation overlay and questions on that, please have us both on that email. We're not playing mom against dad. We're trying to work as a team, and some of the questions you've brought up were concerns of ours. And again, we were handcuffed, and we had to reach compromise if we wanted to move forward. And maybe collectively as a group, we can move forward even better now that they've heard all sides of the story. And again, this goes to vote. This majority rules. If you're a homeowner, you do.
Right, but we vote for a council member.
Yeah, ultimately,
It goes to the 750
correct. It would ultimately, the way the ordinance is written, city council is the ultimate deciding body. There is no requirement that it go out to a vote in the neighborhood. If it were a locally designated historic district, you would definitely have to have that documentation. If there weren't a registered neighborhood group, that would be the approach. So there's a few different ways to get there. Ultimately, city council is the deciding factor, and if they hear from large numbers of people in the neighborhood that they don't want this, then good chance that it won't happen. I will tell you, we don't have a formal application under review at this point, so it's at this point I would say it's premature. This is something that's been discussed, but we don't have any formal proposals to evaluate. So
Quasi-judicial though, and so you can't talk to your counsel.
true. Actually,
It's on the agenda, and even
technically,
if it's on the agenda on first reading, they don't want to talk to you either.
So-
You shouldn't talk to them? If it's considered quasi-judicial,
this is
they're not allowed to talk to you about something that might be pending.
well.
No, it's the law. No, it's the law.
This is quasi-judicial. What makes it quasi-judicial?
So I will clarify. This is a zoning application. So it is an application for rezoning. We're kind of getting the weeds in here right now. So ultimately, these are generally considered legislative, not quasi-judicial, because. So you can reach out to them, but there is the question at this point. Though we don't have anything under consideration, so it's really okay to sit down. So we don't have a formal application under consideration. It might go to them at some point. At this point, we don't have a time frame for it. Ultimately, though, I think at this point, we're going to conclude this portion of the meeting with a live stream so that our folks at Longmont Public Media and our live stream coordinator can go home. And if you're interested in sticking around for a few minutes, I know Sharon and Rick and Bob had some additional items to discuss with members of the community. And again, feel free to reach out.
You're all a part of the association. It's not a private club. It's a neighborhood thing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. At this point, we're going to shut down the live stream portion, and we'll go from there.